Welcome to Peter and Phil's Courageous Conversations, a podcast addressing race relations and social issues in hopes that you'll be inspired to do the same. Now, let's begin our conversation with your hosts, Dr. Peter Weinstein and Dr. Philip Nelson.
Welcome to Courageous Conversations. I'm Dr. Peter Weinstein. I'm here with my partner.
And I'm Dr. Philip Nelson. Glad you could join us.
Thank you to our 18 listeners. We may be up to 19, Phil. I met a new listener last week.
Great.
And to our producer, Nicole, and to the world for giving us plenty to talk about. There is never a dull moment. I would suggest for those of you who remember Disneyland, we are on an e-ticket ride back from the 70s when you used to buy tickets based upon the volatility of the ride. I think this is a roller coaster that is at the bottom of the ride, and hopefully we'll be heading back up soon. But we're sitting at a time of tremendous economic uncertainty and where this is going to head, where it's going to go, what impact it's going to have, and the why, all are great topics for us to peruse today. I think I'm going back to the campaign last year when the promises of great economic growth and better employment and prices going down and all sorts of great carrots that were dangled led to a change in the political environment. And now we are sitting at a time when the world has lost, or the American world has lost trillions of dollars of value, at least in the stock side of things, and the impact that that will have on so many different people and our ability to conduct our lives in a normal fashion. And it's a result of an approach to economics through tariffs, which will only make things more expensive. And whether this is a short-term or a long-term impact, all of this puts a big fist in my stomach right now as I go through the day and talking to friends and colleagues and trying to avoid listening and reading the news. So, Phil, I don't know if you got a gut punch this week, but I've got a feeling that you probably did as well.
Absolutely. But it's not a gut punch that, how does one say this? You know how you feel about an impending doctor's appointment or an impending dental appointment. You're in a lot of pain. You're not looking forward to whatever the doctor or the dentist are going to tell you because you suspect there's something, may be something serious, but you need to get rid of the pain. And so you meet that appointment. That's how I felt after the election. Until the inauguration, I felt that pain. I felt that I knew because I thought something serious was going to happen. I thought that all the signs that we were given during the campaign were real. All the things that the president-elect said he was going to do is coming to fruition. All the denials that his supporters made about he really didn't mean it, he's really not going to do that, are even surprising them, the nihilists. It doesn't feel any better to have believed him. It doesn't feel any better to watch the unfolding of irrational stupidity as it affects not just our national, but our global economy. The greatest insult in this process is the establishment of some mentally constructed emergency and then the use of presidential power to address it without providing any evidence of any emergency. The massive figure of waste to justify the pillage of personal information and accounts is another version of the same tactic that is resulting in our economic calamity that we're watch peel like an onion. And yet all of that pales to the loss of trust this country has created around the world. To artificially generate a formula that most economists can't even recognize in order to justify a tax that is regressive and particularly hurtful to the lower economic class is just another, is a similar tactic where you create a false premise, provide inaccurate data, while you're simultaneously wiping out years and decades of data and records so that there's nothing to contest your assertions with, because this is no longer, because this information is no longer publicly available. When the pulpit is owned by a self-serving oligarch and the free press is intimidated by that same person, the citizen suffers. The citizen finds him or herself struggling to find factual data so that they can make up their own minds, and that's purposeful.
So in my multitude of years in existence and superficially or more deeply following decision-making from Washington, I just can't remember a time when decisions were made at such a unilateral level without going through the legislatures to seek support and to seek support of the Senate and the House, who represents at the grassroots level the political activities that are going on in Washington. And it's just really surprising to me, because if I'm looking at it from a business standpoint, let's say we're running the United States as if it were a business, for a CEO to make unilateral decisions as to how things are done usually will come with pushback, which could be resignation, it could be other things from the employees of such a company. It could be the board of directors resigns, or it could be the board of directors fires the CEO. But what we're seeing here, if we look at the United States, is we're looking at a CEO who is making unilateral decisions for the business without seeking input or sharing positioning from the grassroots individuals who essentially are there to support and help make sure that the decisions are made in a logical fashion. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I just can't remember the last time we have had so many unilateral decisions that are having such a great impact on our livelihoods.
Well, there's no correction necessary. This is what dictators do. Dictators do not submit themselves to agency control. Dictators are the ultimate preeminent decision makers in a system, whether it's a CEO or a rogue president who ignores the Constitution, or an outright forceful oligarch or military man. So we shouldn't be surprised that this particular president acts in every way that avoids consensus making or avoids even opposing thought in order to carefully construct and implement whatever policy he or she may arrive at. In past presidents, whether you were ideologically aligned with that person or not, in my lifetime, most of those presidents at least had kitchen cabinets and cabinets that were encouraged to look at all sides of a problem. And every president yielded to the power of the purse that Congress has and the judicial decisions of the judicial branch. This president openly defies both. If his vote is too close to call, then he does as much damage as he can through presidential edict. And in my opinion, will even go so far as to veto past legislation. That is the only way you get rid of the Department of Education, is if you bypass Congress. It is the only way you fire attorney generals throughout the government, because you bypass Congress. Those attorney generals were established by congressional order, and it is illegal for the president to summarily make an executive decision that eliminates the office. I'm not talking about firing the person. I'm talking about eliminating the office. And that is the danger that has led us to his unusual and precarious plan so the behavior is the same. As much as this may be an economic discussion, This is really a discussion about presidential power, presidential authority, and the balances of power throughout our government, constitutional government.
I'm hoping, I'm play a little devil's advocate here. I'm hoping that we're going through a short-term period of pain that will ultimately lead to a period of pleasure. But right now, with everything that we've seen going on, stock market, worsening of inflation, increasing number of people being laid off and actions there, the efforts to bring peace to the Middle East and to Ukraine, which don't seem to be going anywhere, it just seems like it's a very dark cloud that we're under. And concurrently, we, as you have noted, lost the trust, lost the respect, and have created rifts with those with whom we had stood hand in hand for many generations. And so I'm hoping that the intended consequences, which are to make the United States stronger, more economically vibrant, more efficient, will eventually lead to that. But I'll tell you what, currently, I just can't wrap my arms around the intended consequences because of the unintended consequences that are going on, which has really put a tremendous amount of uncertainty in me and many others on both sides of the political spectrum because we just can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel, Phil, or is that a train coming at us?
Well, you lost me at you might be willing to go through the pain as long as there's pleasure on the other end, and I see no pleasure.
Okay.
This is such a train wreck already that even if the economic plan were to improve, even if the economy was to improve as is predicted by the president, if he continues to follow these haphazard, chaotic decisions with regards to tariffs, I have to ask two questions. The first is the improvement of the economy for whom? And the second would be, and the pain will be borne by whom? And no matter how I turn the page upside down or sideways, I see the same people taking on most of the pain that shouldn't, with no benefit in the end. I see $6 trillion of wealth being washed down the drain with relatively little to no confidence that it will come back in the next year or two. And when it does, it will be redistributed.
You just came back from Mississippi, one of the least affluent states in the country, and a state that has supported the current Republican regime. Do you think that people in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, some of the lower income states are recognizing the same pain and it might change their approach to things? I mean, is the discussion in Jackson, Mississippi the same discussion in Jacksonville, Florida, and the same discussion in Los Angeles, the same discussion in San Francisco? I mean, you just came back from seeing a lot of the Deep South. What do you think the impact's is having down there or could have impact down there?
The impact will be the same. However, the vocal recognition of that impact will be just as polarized as the race issue is in that area. And so it depends on which table you're sitting at to detect. My report of the content of the conversations depends on the color of the people around the table at the time, as well as their positions. If someone is beholding to the Mississippi government, then you do not mention the word DEI. If someone is beholding to the the state legislature. By the way, Mississippi just passed a bill that eliminated income tax in the poorest state in the nation in an attempt to bring in greater tourism and retirees. And yet the retirees that have little or are in the minority in that state are scared to death about whether Medicare and Social Security status. Medicaid is as limited as it can be in Mississippi. They do not accept all the federal funds that they are entitled to because they don't want to have to match it. because of the image that all that money tends to go to the underclass. And I question that number, by the way, as to the makeup. I think the makeup of the underclass racially is similar to the makeup of the racial breakdown for the state as a whole, which means that the majority of the people that are suffering from limited Medicaid are white. But it is assumed that the ones who benefit the most from any government program would be Black or brown. So I think that once again, the pain that's being wrought is being wrought by people. We're about to have, if there were a direct translation between the tariffs and the cost of goods, then there's going to be at least a 10% increase in the cost of goods that are involved in these tariffs. And the people who are buying those goods are the people who don't have any more discretionary income to absorb a 10 to 25% increase. And yet this is all to establish a renegotiation position for the United States. And I have even seen semi-private conversations between citizens in Mississippi who are Republican leaning, and they differ among themselves. You know, some drink the entire bottle of Kool-Aid and say that they're tired of being taken care of by the other countries. And now it's time for us to reposition ourselves and to drive the boat, you know. And then there are others who are under the same tent, who say that they're for the tariffs, but they don't like the way they're being implemented. They don't understand the plan. And they believe that the approach is wrong, not necessarily the solution. And this is as far as most of them will go at this point, you know. And yet nobody talks about, I believe right now, that the White House is isolated. It is isolated. This country has elected an isolationist. We got what we wanted. All right. He has effectively isolated us. Don't let us have a terrorist attack right now. I'm not sure who would come to our assistance at this point. I'm not sure who would honor any of our treaties, because nobody believes we would honor theirs because of the flip-flops that he has made verbally. Even with Ukraine and Russia, when he, in his last economic address, he brought up the fact that he's still working on it and he's close to a deal. But he was more sympathetic and empathetic to the loss of Russian soldiers than he was to Ukraine's. He all but said that he did say this was a stupid war. He almost said it was started by the Ukraine, because we know that's what he believes, or at least it's in his best interest to promote it. Well, if his people can't trust him to reflect history accurately, if his own people can't trust him to take care of them, of the underprivileged as well as the red states, and his closest allies can't trust him not to upset their economic cart willy-nilly, that creates an isolated White House.
So neither you nor I are economists. I play one on television, but I'm not an economist. The number one reason, from what I recall, that the election flipped the direction it was because of the economy and the cost of living. Right now, the impact on the economics of the United States are devastating in so many different ways. I mean, cost of gasoline is up, cost of eggs is up. And what we're seeing, which I think is interesting, it is a greater grassroots protesting of what's going on. Now, if you think back to the original election of 2016, we had that march on Washington right after the election, the Women's March. But there just didn't seem to be as many post-election protests as we're seeing now. On a national scope, there are groups of individuals meeting in cities and counties and small towns to express their dissatisfaction with the direction that we are heading. Since the Vietnam War, I can't think of this type, and then probably during the George Floyd era during 5 years ago, basically, when there were a lot of city-based protests. I can't remember the last time we have had this much of a vocalization of the people at the grassroots level expressing their dissatisfaction. And you would think, as a leader, that the voice of the people would be of concern. It doesn't seem to be. And in fact, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the town halls that many of the legislators and senators, representative senators do have been kind of squashed, at least on the Republican side, because there has been so much tumult. What's it going to take, and is it even doable, to get the attention of the, as you noted, isolated White House and hear the voice of the people, Vox Populi?
I don't know. I do know it's going to take a louder voice to be heard, even as a whisper, by those in power. They came in with a plan, Peter, that they're following to the letter. And when you're so busy making sure that you can tell your constituents that you did what you said you were going to do, even if they don't want you to do it anymore, you're not necessarily listening to them saying, wait a minute, I changed my mind, let me off the bus. And their response is, the bus is going too fast and we're not stopping. You can jump if you want to, but we received the mandate. That money is in the bank. We told you we're going to spend it this way, and when you got upset about it before the election, we lied and said, okay, we never read that plan. We don't even know where it came from. So honestly, this is one of those times when I'm more pessimistic than you. On the other hand, I am not reticent to accept it. I haven't given up. It's just that we are going to, as you said, we are going to have to raise our voice. Now, whether they're listening or not is not necessarily the goal of our fight. Our fight is to restrict the effectiveness of the subverting of a democracy. We're on the defensive. It's time to get on the offensive, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the battle lines that have been drawn are going to move immediately. But they don't have to continue to progress into our territory. And what's really important here is the fact people are beginning to understand the true consequences of these unilateral actions, as well as the lack of planning. As much as they had planned, it was not to the detail that they truly understand the impact of all of their actions. I don't call them unintended. I call them unthought of, and I'm not sure they care. Unintended consequences tends to suggest that something happened they didn't mean to and that they want to correct it. These consequences are occurring at levels that they barely feel or care about, or at least that's the way it seems. And it won't be until they are convinced that they cannot repair the relationship with enough voters to keep them in power. That is what it's going to take.
Perfect, Phil. Because this conversation, which we've been doing for almost 5 years now, is called Courageous Conversations. And there has been no time in the last 5 years that this is the time when we need courageous conversations more than ever. And whether that conversation is one-on-one, 1-on-10, or whether it is going and joining some of the group conversations that are happening in and around your communities, this is an important time to have a voice. It's also an important time to listen. It's an important time to honor Gandhi and Martin Luther King and show your voice in a passive fashion, with the thought that down the road, your vote and the vote of others can ultimately influence the long term. But in the meantime, I think it's extremely important to, at the grassroots level, the one-on-one level, the one-on-two level, to have a voice, to have a courageous conversation, to share your concerns, your fears, your anxieties, and to not sit quietly at this stage. I think sitting quietly is going to make you a victim, and I think it's time that we start to look to become a victor.
Well said. To our listeners, I believe that you should understand the pivotal point we are at this point in our history. Regardless of your political whims, if you believe in America, you believe in the Constitution of the United States. And if you believe in the Constitution of the United States, you believe in the three branches of the three co-equal branches of government. And regardless of your position on any of the presidential edicts and directives or any of the presidential's planks in his programs, you should at least come to common ground that there is a constitutional process that should be respected, and that it is the definition of chaos if a president can come in and simply undo by presidential fiat a decision that has legislative authority, which is the reflection of a consensus of the representatives of the population in the government. That has to take priority over presidential whims or even presidential orders. We must also be careful about simply accepting a classification of an emergency without appropriate data, and that emergency should be ratified by our representatives in Congress. In other words, we should be asking, or better yet, demanding, that our congressional representatives reestablish their authority and that they practice their checks and balance on these rogue maneuvers.
Well, let's say drop mic on that one, Dr. Nelson. And thank you for your insights. And again, let's have this continued conversation courageously between you and I, but advocate for it amongst our 19 listeners or so and help them to continue to bring this forward. It's going to take a grassroots effort.
It is. And I want to reemphasize that this is not a conversation about the individual policies themselves. Although we may have certain positions on the impact and consequences of some of these practices, our major issue are the practices themselves and the undermining of any agency or branch of government that is not consulted or involved in establishing these practices.
Join us next time for an ongoing courageous conversation, which is getting more and more courageous as we go along. Thank you, Phil. Thank you, Nicole. Thanks to our listeners. We look forward to continuing to help navigate choppy waters.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you to our listeners. And Nicole, please help us look better than we did just now.
Thank you for joining us for another courageous conversation. Be sure to follow us and check back next week for more.